You've probably noticed how some people manage to survive in any situation, even when everything around them seems to fall apart. Banda, from Alice in Borderland, is an extreme example of that. Cold, calculating, always one step ahead. But here's the paradox. What looks like strength is actually the result of traumas that most of us try to hide. Loneliness, fear, mistrust, all of that shaped each of his choices. In this video, you'll discover how those experiences that seem to weaken someone can actually become powerful weapons and maybe learn to apply that in your own life. If you're a fan of movies, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. Where in the world are you watching this video from right now? Leave your answer in the comments. Banda is a character who at first glance seems like just another survivor in the chaos of Alice in Borderland. But if you look closer, you'll notice the complexity behind his sharp gaze. He's not the kind who gives in to fear. There's a strange calmness in him, as if he's already learned to observe before acting. This posture sparks curiosity because you quickly realize there's much more behind his facade, something most people ignore. He's that kind of character that makes you think, what brought him here? And how does he deal with it? From the beginning, Banda shows that he doesn't fit the group's usual patterns. He's observant, silent, but not passive. There's an almost intuitive calculation in every step he takes that makes us reflect on how many times we ourselves hide behind silence as a way to protect ourselves. He doesn't seek attention, but the way he moves through the scene suggests that he's always one step ahead, even if no one notices. It's almost hypnotic to follow his movements, as if the world adjusts to his rhythm. One of the first things that stands out is the confidence Banda conveys without saying a single word. That confidence, however, doesn't come from nowhere. It's the result of a personal history that shaped him. He seems to carry experiences that taught him to deal with tension, danger, and unpredictability in a strategic way. This behavior makes the viewer wonder, how many times in life have we had to learn to trust only ourselves? And how many times has that changed us? Banda's way of analyzing situations is methodical, almost clinical. He doesn't get carried away by the emotional chaos that consumes others. Instead, he observes patterns, reads intentions, and calculates risks. This ability not only makes him a survivor, but also makes us reflect on the value of understanding the people around us before reacting. How many important decisions have you made without really understanding what was happening around you? Banda shows us that observing can be just as powerful as acting. Despite his calm exterior, there's something in his gaze that suggests emotional depth experiences that can't be easily verbalized. He reminds us how often we carry complex inner stories, even when the world only sees our surface. It's that feeling that everyone around you has invisible battles, and that silence can be just as revealing as any spoken word. By observing Banda, we realize how many layers we hide from the world. Banda also represents a kind of strength that doesn't impose itself. It's discreet but solid. He challenges us to rethink the idea of power. It's not about shouting louder or imposing, but about understanding the environment, anticipating movements, and acting at the right moment. How many times in life have we ignored this silent form of power, chasing immediate recognition instead? Banda is a reminder that true strength is often invisible. The character also awakens an almost empathetic connection with the viewer. Even without sharing explicit stories about his life, we feel that he has gone through trials that could have broken anyone. It's that mystery that keeps us hooked, making us want to uncover not just what he does, but who he really is inside. Banda reminds us that everyone carries invisible scars, and understanding them can make us more human. And finally, the most fascinating thing about Banda is that he's not perfect. He has flaws, hesitations, and moments of doubt, yet he still moves forward. That creates an immediate identification with the audience. How many times have we felt small in the face of chaos, but kept going anyway? Banda is a mirror of our own silent struggles, and it's impossible not to connect with that. Which leads us to want to understand what motivated each of his choices, the traumas that shaped his journey, and how he deals with them. Banda's story is marked by a constant sense of displacement. From an early age, he learned that not all places or people are safe, and that perception shaped his way of seeing the world. Every decision he makes in the game isn't just strategic, but a reflection of years of silent observation of reality. It's interesting how the trauma of feeling out of place can make someone both adaptable and cautious at the same time. It makes us think, how many times has life forced us to grow up too fast? Banda carries the weight of mistrust. He has already suffered deep disappointments, where trusting someone meant putting himself at risk. This trauma taught him to measure every word, every gesture, and even every look. It's as if his brain recorded, trusting too much is dangerous. We know that feeling too, don't we? Who hasn't had to learn to protect themselves emotionally after being betrayed? Banda turns that pain into silent strength. Another intense conflict Banda faces is dealing with responsibility for himself and for others. He realizes early on that saving everyone isn't always possible, and that each choice carries irreversible consequences. That internal pressure generates tension but also clarity. He learns to prioritize what really matters, even when his heart wishes he could act differently. It's almost a daily exercise in forced maturity, something we can all recognize in critical moments of life. Loneliness is another trauma that shapes Banda. He spends much of his time isolated, observing, calculating, but feeling a painful distance from the rest of the group. That loneliness isn't just physical, but emotional, a kind of invisible prison. Many people carry that same feeling even when surrounded by others. Banda reminds us that being alone isn't just the absence of company, but also an opportunity to truly know yourself. Fear and anxiety are constant companions in his journey. He's faced situations where any mistake could be fatal, and that made him hyper-alert. But paradoxically, he uses that fear as fuel, as a silent engine that drives his decisions. It's fascinating to see how traumas can turn into survival skills, something we can all apply when facing extreme challenges. Banda also faces internal conflicts related to morality. He constantly needs to decide between doing what's right or doing what's necessary to survive. That struggle is silent but intense, and it makes us question our own choices in extreme situations. How many times in life have we had to weigh what's right against what's safe? Banda shows us that ethics and survival can collide, and the solution isn't always clear. Another delicate point is his frustration with the unpredictability of the world. Banda has seen plans destroyed, people lost, and moments of hope fade away. That trauma forces him to develop resilience, but also to accept that not everything is under his control. It's a lesson in humility and realism that we can all apply when dealing with situations beyond our reach. And finally, all those traumas converge to form someone extremely strategic, cold when necessary, but deeply human inside. Banda isn't a character without emotion. He's the reflection of how difficult experiences shape personality, choices, and worldview. Each trauma is a building block, and each decision is a direct reflection of that emotional baggage. And so, we realize that understanding his story is just the beginning of uncovering how he faces each challenge of the game. Mistrust and its impact on Banda's personality. The first trauma that shapes Banda is the deep mistrust he developed throughout his life. From an early age, he realized that not everyone had good intentions, and that made him look at the world with caution. This mistrust shows in every decision, in every step he takes, making him strategic and observant. It's as if he learned to play chess with people, calculating moves even before any confrontation. Who hasn't had to protect themselves emotionally like that? This mistrust, however, is not only defensive, but also transformative. Banda has learned to read subtle signs, to interpret silences and intentions that others ignore. He has developed a sharp perception, almost like a radar for risky situations. This radar is not only a survival tool, but also a reflection of how much past experiences shape us. It is fascinating to realize how life teaches us to trust less and observe more. The impact of this trauma goes beyond behavior. It influences Banda's emotions. He keeps his distance, avoids forming quick bonds, and even friendships are filtered through this lens of caution. This creates an aura of mystery, but also loneliness. How many times have we found ourselves avoiding connections for fear of being betrayed? Banda reminds us that emotional protection comes with a price, the feeling of isolation, even among close people. Mistrust also shapes how Banda interacts in the game. He does not allow himself to be carried away by others' impulsive decisions and avoids acting out of blind compassion. Every choice is measured, every move calculated, as if he were always 2 steps ahead. It is a clear example of how old traumas can become survival tools. The question is, do we use our past experiences as a shield or as a prison? This trauma also influences Banda's morality. He constantly needs to balance caution and empathy, deciding when to help and when to preserve his own safety. This inner tension connects us because we have all found ourselves in situations where protecting ourselves conflicts with doing what is right. He shows us that learning to balance mistrust and action is a vital skill, but not an easy one to master. Another interesting effect is how mistrust sharpens Banda's creativity. He needs to invent strategies, anticipate movements, and predict consequences without depending on anyone. This type of strategic thinking is often underestimated, but it is one of his greatest weapons. We can think of it as an analogy. How many times in life have we had to reinvent ourselves because we could not fully trust others? Banda turns trauma into opportunity. Furthermore, mistrust makes him resilient. He is not easily shaken by surprises or betrayals because he has already internalized that the world is unpredictable. This quiet resilience is a trait we can all admire and apply to our lives. After all, who has never faced unexpected changes that demanded immediate adaptation? Banda inspires us to use past experiences as a foundation, not as a burden. And finally, this first trauma paves the way to understanding Banda's other conflicts. Mistrust is the foundation upon which all his other traumas and decisions rest. It creates behavioral patterns, shapes relationships, and guides choices in subtle but powerful ways. It is impossible to unravel his character without realizing how this shadow of the past influences every move. And it is precisely this insight that prepares us to explore the next trauma. Loneliness and its impact on Banda. Loneliness is one of the most silent traumas Banda faces. He lives surrounded by people, yet true connection is rare, forcing him to rely on himself. This experience shapes his autonomy and self-sufficiency, but also leaves an invisible void that only he perceives. It is like walking through a world full of noise and still feeling deaf to the presence of others, who has never felt alone in the middle of a crowd. This loneliness also awakens a unique sensitivity. Banda learns to observe nuances that go unnoticed by others, picking up emotions, intentions, and behavioral patterns. This sharp perception is not just a survival skill, but an extension of his mind that seeks to fill the inner void. It is impressive how loneliness can teach us to see beyond the obvious. Loneliness, however, also creates constant inner tension. Banda questions whether to trust or open up, knowing it could lead to disappointment. Every relationship is measured, every approach evaluated. This caution shapes his behavior, making him meticulous and strategic, but sometimes cold to others. It is almost as if he carries an invisible manual of emotional self-protection. Another effect of loneliness is deep introspection. Banda spends much time reflecting on his actions, motivations, and future. This self-analysis makes him smarter, more foresighted, and resilient, but also keeps him distant from human warmth. How many times has introspection helped us make better decisions, even if it left us isolated temporarily? Banda reminds us of the power of looking within ourselves. Loneliness also strengthens his independence, but not without cost. He learns not to depend on anyone to be his own emotional and strategic support. This strength is admirable, but it makes us wonder, is the price of being completely self-sufficient worth it? Banda shows us that independence and loneliness walk side by side, often inseparable. On the other hand, this experience makes him empathetic in a quiet way. He perceives loneliness in others and understands the hidden motivations that guide their actions. It is as if the pain he carries serves as a lens to see and understand others. And this leads us to reflect. Can pain itself teach us to connect with others more deeply? Loneliness also influences decision-making in the game. He does not rely on fragile alliances, prioritizing moves that guarantee his survival. This strategic stance is a direct result of years of dealing with the absence of consistent support. It is a lesson on how the lack of companionship can force creativity and strategic intelligence. And finally, this trauma lays the groundwork for understanding how Banda faces fear and pressure. Loneliness not only shapes his personality, but establishes behavioral patterns that are reflected in all his choices. It is impossible to unravel his actions without recognizing how this experience of isolation shaped his mind and heart. And this leads us directly to the next trauma he faces: fear and anxiety and their impact on Banda. Fear is a constant presence in Banda's life. Every move in the game carries the awareness that one mistake could be fatal. This trauma does not paralyze him. On the contrary, it turns him into someone alert, quick, and strategic. It is curious how fear, when understood, can be a silent guide and not just a shadow that haunts us. How many times in life have we learned more from fear than from safety? Anxiety, in turn, functions as an internal alarm. Banda feels every tension in the environment as if his body were an antenna calibrated for danger. This constant state of alert shapes his perception, making him extremely vigilant. We can think of this as a perfected survival mechanism. The brain learns to identify risks before they happen. It is impressive how fear can refine abilities we never imagined possessing. Fear and anxiety also impact his emotional decisions. Banda does not let himself be carried away by impulses or by others' momentary reactions. He calculates every step. This approach is not cold, it is adaptive. It teaches us that traumas not only hurt us but can also equip us with valuable survival tools. It is like learning to swim in turbulent waters. Fear teaches us not to drown. Another effect of these traumas is internal discipline. Banda organizes his actions, reviews strategies, and anticipates consequences, always guided by the alertness to danger. Anxiety turns into strength, creating behavioral patterns that ensure precision and efficiency. This makes us reflect on how the human mind can turn negative experiences into advantages when properly directed. Fear also strengthens his emotional resilience. Banda learns to endure extreme pressure without losing clarity. He becomes someone who, even with his heart racing, can stay calm and act rationally. It is fascinating to realize that traumas can not only scar but also shape the ability to face challenges with composure. This constant internal tension influences how Banda relates to others. He observes their vulnerabilities and intentions, creating strategies for both mutual and individual protection. The fear of trusting blindly shapes relationships and alliances, making each connection more calculated. It is a lesson on how traumas shape not only the individual, but also their social interactions. Fear and anxiety still generate adaptability. Banda learns quickly, adjusts plans within seconds, and anticipates the movements of both opponents and allies. This ability does not come from natural talent, but from years of dealing with instability and pressure. It is like an athlete who turns pain into training. Each difficult experience becomes fuel for the next challenge. And finally, this trauma intertwines with the previous ones, creating a complete personality, strategic, resilient, cautious, and observant. The fear that could paralyze him turns into a driving force for action, shaping his choices and behaviors. And it is precisely this ability to transform vulnerability into strength that prepares us to understand how Banda faces the next conflict. Moral conflict and ethical dilemmas of Banda, one of Banda's most complex traumas, is moral conflict. He constantly needs to decide between doing what is right or what ensures his survival. Each choice weighs heavily, each action has consequences, and this forces him to reflect deeply before acting. It is like walking a tightrope. One wrong step could bring him and those around him down. Who has never felt trapped between what is right and what is necessary? These dilemmas shape his personality, making him calculating but not insensitive. Banda learns to weigh each situation, measuring risks and benefits, but always guided by an ethical conscience. He reminds us that intelligence and morality can coexist, even in extreme environments. It is impressive how external pressures can strengthen internal principles if we learn to balance them. Moral conflict also influences his interactions. He observes allies and adversaries, trying to understand how far they can be trusted and when to act to protect himself or the group. This constant analysis creates a kind of ethical vigilance that goes beyond the instinct for survival. It is a reminder that our decisions rarely affect only ourselves. Another effect of this trauma is intense introspection. Banda revisits past choices, questions his own limits, and tries to anticipate future decisions. This constant reflection does not weaken him. On the contrary, it strengthens his ability to act with precision and purpose. We have all caught ourselves thinking, "Did I do the right thing?" Banda shows us that the weight of conscience can also be a valuable guide. Ethical tension also generates a subtle strategic skill. He learns to balance justice and pragmatism, seeking solutions that minimize harm without sacrificing principles. It is like playing moral chess. Each piece represents lives, opportunities, and invisible consequences. This kind of complex reasoning makes us realize that, even under pressure, it is possible to act with both intelligence and ethics. Moral conflict also manifests in relationship management. Banda needs to choose when to trust, when to lead, and when to follow, always considering the ethical impact of his actions. This constant awareness shapes his demeanor, making him trustworthy yet reserved. It is a reminder that inner principles influence not only decisions, but also how we connect with others. Another important point is the sense of responsibility that accompanies each choice. Banda feels the weight of possible losses and mistakes, which keeps him alert and careful. This responsibility is not only about survival, but about preserving integrity, trust, and values. How many times in life have we felt overwhelmed by difficult choices? He teaches us to transform this pressure into clarity and focus. And finally, this trauma directly connects to the other conflicts he faces. Moral conflict interacts with fear, loneliness, and mistrust, shaping a coherent and multifaceted character. Each decision reflects multiple internal layers, and it is impossible to understand his actions without recognizing this continuous ethical tension, which naturally leads us to explore the next trauma that influences his journey. Frustration and unpredictability in Banda's life. Frustration is a constant presence in Banda's life. Meticulously crafted plans often collapse, leaving him face to face with the unexpected. This trauma, though challenging, forces him to develop admirable mental flexibility. It is like learning to surf waves that change direction every instant. Those who resist fall. Those who adapt move forward. Who has never been caught off guard by something beyond our control? Unpredictability also teaches him to trust his own abilities. Banda realizes that when the world changes without warning, depending on others is not always safe. This lesson builds self-confidence, even amid chaos. It is curious how frustrating situations can, paradoxically, strengthen us, showing that we are capable of more than we imagine. This trauma shapes his patience. He learns that not everything happens when we want it to, and that forcing results only creates more problems. Banda develops his own rhythm, knowing when to wait for the right moment to act. It is like waiting for the right tide to move forward. Patience becomes strategy. We have all felt the tension of wanting immediate results, but life often teaches us to wait. Frustration also sharpens Banda's creativity. When faced with unexpected obstacles, he must reinvent strategies, think quickly, and improvise. Each surprise becomes an opportunity for innovation, turning problems into solutions. This process reminds us that adversity can be a silent school where every mistake and setback becomes a lesson. Another effect is emotional resilience. Banda faces repeated defeats, yet remains focused, recovering quickly from disappointments. This inner strength does not arise from luck, but from the need to survive and adapt. It is inspiring to realize how constant traumas can create someone capable of absorbing blows without completely breaking. Unpredictability also influences his relationships. He learns to assess intentions, measure risks when interacting with others, and choose allies carefully. Each social decision is calculated, reflecting the lesson that trusting too much can be dangerous. It is a lesson we all know. Not everyone around us follows the same rules or expectations as we do. Furthermore, frustration reinforces his focus on what is essential. Banda does not allow himself to be distracted by irrelevant details or illusions of control. He prioritizes what truly matters, acting in a practical and efficient way. This ability makes us think about how life often teaches us, in harsh ways, to separate what is urgent from what is secondary. And finally, frustration and unpredictability intertwine with all the other traumas. Creating a strategic, resilient, and adaptable mind, Banda does not merely react to challenges. He transforms them into fuel to grow and survive. And it is this capacity for adaptation that naturally leads us to explore the final topic: how all these traumas combine to define his complete personality and final decisions. The construction of Banda's personality and decisions. All of Banda's traumas intertwine like invisible threads, forming a complex fabric that defines who he is. Mistrust, loneliness, fear, ethical dilemmas, and frustration merge, creating a unique personality, strategic, resilient, and deeply human. Each painful experience turns into learning, shaping his actions and decisions. It is like watching a sculpture being carved, where each strike leaves a permanent mark. Mistrust makes him cautious but also perceptive. He can identify hidden intentions and anticipate risks, which ensures his survival. This trait, combined with loneliness, strengthens his autonomy, making him someone who relies primarily on himself. It is fascinating to see how traumas can create abilities that, in another context, could seem like silent superpowers. Loneliness and fear shape his emotions, making him introspective and vigilant. Banda learns to control impulses, to reflect before acting, and to transform anxiety into strategic alertness. It is like turning tension into directed energy, a lesson we can all apply in real life when facing unexpected challenges. Moral conflict and ethical dilemmas refine his judgment. He learns to balance survival and principles, turning each choice into a conscious act rather than a mere instinctive reaction. This ability to weigh consequences reminds us that life often demands decisions beyond the obvious, where what is right and what is necessary do not always align. Frustration and unpredictability strengthen his resilience. Each setback, each broken plan becomes an opportunity to adapt and improve. Banda does not merely react. He grows in the face of adversity, turning obstacles into continuous learning. It is like training under extreme conditions to emerge stronger and more prepared. All these traumas together shape his strategy for interacting with others. He observes, calculates, trusts selectively, and acts with precision. His relationships are not superficial. Each bond is measured and evaluated based on past experiences. This creates a conscious network of choices, where every action carries weight and purpose. Banda's personality is, therefore, a combination of emotional intelligence, strategic skill, and quiet resilience. He is someone who has learned to transform vulnerabilities into strength and traumas into survival tools. It is inspiring to realize that adversity, when properly assimilated, can forge a solid and multifaceted character. And finally, this synthesis leads us to realize that understanding Banda means understanding how each trauma influences his decisions and worldview. Each choice in the game is not random. It carries echoes of his past, internal fears, and ethical principles. It is impossible to unravel his journey without recognizing this complex interplay of traumas and experiences. So, what did you think of Banda's journey? Can you identify with any of the traumas or strategies he uses to survive? Which character would you like me to analyze in the next video on the channel? Leave it in the comments because I want to know your opinion. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the deep analyses full of insights about Alice in Borderland. Each video is an opportunity to better understand the human mind and discover how to transform challenges into strength.